The Forgotten Feast: How Food Shaped Ancient Egypt. For thousands of years, travelers have stood before the pyramids of Giza with their shadows stretching across the desert like the hands of ancient giants. They stare at the massive stones, the perfect geometry, the sheer impossibility of their construction, and they ask the same question: how did the Egyptians build all of this? But very few ask the question that truly reveals the soul of a civilization. What did they eat? What fueled the people who raised an empire that would outlive kingdoms, dynasties, and entire eras of human history? Tonight, you and I step far beyond the tombs and temples. We're going into their kitchens, their markets, their fields, their festivals. We're going to taste the forgotten flavors that nourished one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. This is the story of the ancient Egyptian diet, not just what they ate, but how food shaped their daily lives, their beliefs, their health, their power, and even their afterlife. Everything begins with the Nile. In a land where the deserts could kill a man in an afternoon, the Nile was a miracle. Every year, like a heartbeat, the river rose, spilled over its banks, flooded the fields, and then retreated, leaving behind a layer of rich black soil so fertile that it could grow life out of almost nothing. The Egyptians called their land Kemet, the Black Land, because this soil was the foundation of their survival. In that soil, their entire diet was born. For the common people, the farmers, fishermen, laborers, craftsmen, food was simple, practical, and surprisingly nutritious. At the center of everything stood bread. It was the backbone of the Egyptian diet. Made from emmer wheat or barley, it came in countless forms: small loaves, large loaves, flatbreads, festival breads, sweetbreads stuffed with dates or drizzled with honey. Bread was so important that workers were literally paid in loaves. Families stored it carefully. And when someone died, they packed their tombs with bread for the journey into the afterlife. If bread was the body of Egypt, then beer was its lifeblood. But their beer wasn't the golden, bubbly drink we think of today. It was thick, cloudy, rich in calories, and full of nutrients. It was safer to drink than the water. Children drank it. Workers building the pyramids drank 3 daily rations of it. Imagine that, a civilization built on beer that was basically liquid bread. Vegetables grew easily in the fertile soil. Onions, garlic, leeks, lettuce, cucumbers, radishes. These weren't just foods, they were believed to have powerful properties. Garlic was seen as a strength enhancer. Onions were sacred and associated with the idea of eternity because of their layered shape. And some mummies were even buried with onions placed inside their bodies as symbols of protection. Fish was the most common source of protein. The Nile was full of tilapia, catfish, mullet, and Nile perch. Families grilled fish over small fires, dried it under the sun to preserve it, or cooked it with herbs and vegetables. Meat, on the other hand, was rare for ordinary Egyptians. A goose for a feast, a duck for a celebration, maybe some goat or lamb if they had extra wealth. Beef was almost sacred, mainly reserved for temple rituals or the elite. Fruits brought sweetness to their meals. Dates, figs, grapes, pomegranates, melons, all grew abundantly. Dates were eaten fresh or pressed into compact cakes for travel. They were both food and natural candy. This was the diet that kept the common people alive, simple but strong, repeating day after day for centuries. But in the palaces of the pharaohs, the story changed dramatically. The elite of Egypt ate like royalty in every sense. Their meals were feasts of abundance and power. They dined on roasted beef, gazelle, antelope, pigeon, and quail. They enjoyed exotic spices from far-off lands, oils and nuts imported across the Mediterranean, and wines from Syria, Lebanon, and Crete. Food for the rich was not only sustenance, it was a political statement. The more luxurious the meal, the greater the glory of the host. Honey was the sweetest treasure in all of Egypt. Used in desserts, medicines, offerings to the gods, and even embalming, honey symbolized purity and eternal life. The pharaohs kept entire beekeeping complexes to produce it. Their royal gardens were filled with fruit trees, figs, pomegranates, dates, sycamore figs, and grapevines that produced fine wines sealed in jars proudly labeled with vineyard names and vintages. But to truly understand food in ancient Egypt, you must see it through their eyes, not as nourishment, but as ritual. Every morning in temples across the kingdom, priests prepared meals for the gods: bread, beer, fruit, meat, incense. These offerings fed the gods spiritually, and after the rituals were complete, the priests would eat the remains. This wasn't gluttony, it was sacred recycling. Life flowed from the gods to the people through shared food. The dead also needed food. Tomb scenes show fish, bread, wine, fruits, and meats offered to the deceased. Egyptians believed that a carved image of food could transform into real sustenance in the afterlife. So even if a tomb contained no physical bread, the carvings on the walls ensured the soul would never starve. Yet their diet had hidden dangers. Because grain was ground between stone tools, tiny bits of grit mixed into the flour. Over time, this sand wore down their teeth. Many mummies show horribly eroded teeth, worn flat, infected, full of abscesses. It wasn't sugar that damaged their mouths, it was sand. And the Nile, though sacred, held parasites. Drinking contaminated water or eating undercooked fish could spread disease. Still, compared to other ancient societies, Egyptians lived relatively healthy lives. Their diets were rich in fiber, low in sugar, and filled with vegetables. Combined with their physically active lifestyle, they were stronger and lived longer than many of their contemporaries. Now, imagine a typical morning in an Egyptian household. The sun rises over the river. A mother kneels beside a grinding stone, turning grain into flour. Her children gather onions from the garden. Her husband prepares fishing nets or heads to the fields. The smell of bread baking fills their small mud brick home. They eat together on the floor, bread, onions, perhaps some leftover fish, and drink a jug of fresh beer before beginning their day. This scene stayed the same for nearly 3,000 years. Generations lived and died with this rhythm. But when a royal festival arrived, Egypt transformed. Picture the palace of Ramses II during a celebration. Fires crackle in massive kitchens, meat roasts on spits, tables overflow with fruits dripping in honey, cakes shaped like lotus flowers, roasted ducks stuffed with herbs, baskets of grapes, and amphorae of imported wine. Music fills the air, dancers move through halls lined with torches. The feast becomes a symbol of divine abundance, proof that the gods favored Egypt above all nations. Through every moment of Egyptian life, from daily meals to sacred offerings, food shaped the course of history. Bread kept workers alive long enough to carve stone. Beer hydrated them through brutal heat. Fruits and vegetables strengthened families. Meat displayed power. Honey defined luxury. And grain, the core of their agriculture, became the economic engine of the entire civilization. Taxes were paid in grain. Salaries were paid in grain. Grain fed the temples, the tomb builders, the soldiers, the scribes. Even today, as we stand before the remains of ancient Egypt, we can still feel the echoes of their meals. The pyramids tell a story of engineering. The temples tell a story of religion. The mummies tell a story of death. But their kitchens tell a story of life. The grinding of grain, the smell of baking bread, the bubbling of beer, the laughter of families eating together. These are the quiet sounds that built an empire. When we talk about ancient Egypt, we often talk about pharaohs, gods, hieroglyphs, and monuments. But the truth is far simpler and far more human. This civilization survived because it knew how to feed itself. Its greatness rose not just from stone and gold, but from fields, farms, ovens, and fishing boats. This is the forgotten feast of Egypt, a story not carved into stone but baked into bread, not sealed in sarcophagi but simmered in simple kitchens, not written in scrolls, but passed through thousands of generations by the hands of mothers, the labor of farmers, and the rise and fall of the Nile. More than 4,000 years later, the taste of their world is gone, but the story of their food still nourishes our understanding. And maybe, in the shadows of the pyramids, the scent of ancient bread is still drifting through time, reminding us that even the greatest empires begin with something as humble as a meal.